Hello and welcome to chapter 24 of Radiating Literature. This chapter is just called Save Him! It's an exclamation mark. We crossed from England by the evening boat, and the following morning saw us in St. Omer, whither Jack Renaud had been taken. End of the sentence. Whither Jack Renaud had been taken. Poirot lost no time in visiting Hotet. He did not seem disappointed to make any objections to my accompanying him. I bore him company. As he did not seem disposed to making any objections to my accompanying him, I bore him company. You should not use company so much in that. Anyways, after various formalities and preliminaries, we were conducted to the examining magistrate's room. He greeted us cordially. I was told that you had returned to England, Poirot. I am glad to find that such is not the case. It is... Oops, sorry. Let me mute my computer. Okay, my bad. Okay. It is true that I went there, Le Judge, but it was only for a flying visit, a side issue, but one that I fancied might repay investigation. And it did, eh? Poirot shrugged his shoulders. Hotet nodded, sighing. We must resign ourselves, I fear. That animal Gerard, his manners are abominable, but he is undoubtedly clever. Not much chance of that one making a mistake. You think not, Le Judge? It was the examining magistrate's turn to shrug his shoulders. Cool. God, we're all shrugging shoulders about murder and killing someone for murder. Anyways. Bien. Speaking frankly, in confidence, c'est entendu. Can you come to any other conclusion? Frankly, Le Judge, there seem to me to be many points that are obscure, such as... But Poirot was not to be drawn. I have not yet tabulated them, he remarked. It was a general reflection that I was making. I like the young man, and should be sorry to believe him guilty of such a hideous crime. By the way, what has he to say for himself on the matter? The magistrate frowned. I cannot understand him. He seems incapable of putting up any sort of defense. It has been most difficult to get him to answer questions. Excuse me? He contents himself with a general denial, and beyond that takes refuge in a most obstinate silence. I am interrogating him tomorrow. Perhaps you would like to be present? We accepted the invitation with impressment. Or possibly impressement. I don't know. It's italicized. A distressing case, said the magistrate with a sigh. My sympathy for Madame Renaud is profound. How is Madame Renaud? She has not yet recovered consciousness. Ooh. Y'all should, get a doctor on that. It is merciful in a way. Poor woman, she is being spared much. The doctors say there is no danger, but that when she comes to herself, she might be kept as quiet as possible. It was, I understand, quite as much the shock as the fall which caused her present state. It would be terrible if her brain became unhinged, and I should not wonder at all. No, really, not at all. Hotet leaned back, shaking his head with a sort of mournful enjoyment as he envisaged the gloomy prospect, that roused himself at length and observed with a start, That reminds me, I have a letter for you, Poirot. Let me see, where did I put it? He proceeded to rummage amongst his papers. At last he found the missive and handed it to Poirot. It was sent under cover to me in order that I might forward it to you, he explained. But as you left no address, I could not do so. Yeah, how could you possibly find the address of, a super famous detective? I'm sure no one possibly could look that up. I'm sure, detectives couldn't figure out what that is. Okay. Poirot studied the letter curiously. It was addressed in a long, sloping foreign hand, and the writing was decidedly a woman's. Cool. Poirot did not open it. Instead, he put it in his pocket and rose to his feet. A demain, then, Le Judge. Many thanks for your courtesy and amiability. But not at all. I'm always at your service. These young detectives of the school of Gerard, they're all alike rude, sneering fellows. You're acting like Poirot doesn't sneer people, and that's nuts. They do not realize that an examining magistrate of my experience is bound to have a certain discernment, a certain flair. Enfin, I don't know. I can't pronounce French. The politeness of the old school is infinitely more to my taste. Therefore, my dear friend, command me in any way you will. We know a thing or two, you and I, eh? And laughing heartily, enchanted with himself and with us, Hotet bade us adieu. I am sorry to have to record that Poirot's first remark to me as we traversed the corridor was, "Famous old imbecile, that one! Oh, of a stupidity to make pity!" We were just leaving the building when we came face to face with Gerard, looking more dandified than ever, and thoroughly pleased with himself. "Ah, Poirot!" he cried airily. "You have returned from England, then?" "As you see," said Poirot. "The end of the case is not far off, I fancy." "I agree with you, Gerard." Poirot spoke in a subdued tone. His crestfallen manner seemed to delight the other. Okay, this is Gerard speaking. "Of all the milk and water criminals, not an idea of defending himself. It is extraordinary." "So extraordinary that it gives one to think, does it not?" suggested Poirot mildly. But Gerard was not even listening. He twirled his cane amicably. "Well, good day, Poirot. I'm glad you're satisfied of young Renaud's guilt at last." "Pardon? But I am not in the least satisfied. Jack Renaud is innocent." Gerard stared for a moment, then burst out laughing, tapping his head significantly with the brief remark, "I think this is touche, but it looks like touquet." So, who knows? Poirot drew himself up. A dangerous light showed in his eyes. "Gerard, throughout the case your manner to me has been deliberately insulting." "So has yours, Poirot." "You need teaching a lesson. I'm prepared to wager you 500 francs that I find the murderer of Renaud before you do. Is it agreed?" Gerard stared helplessly at him and murmured again, "Touche or touquet, I'm not sure." "Come now," urged Poirot, "is it agreed?" "I have no wish to take your money from you." "Make your mind easy, you will not." "Oh, well, then, I agree. You speak of my manner to be insulting? Eh bien, once or twice your manner has annoyed me." "I am enchanted to hear it," said Poirot. "Good morning, Gerard. Come, Hastings." I said no word as we walked along the street. My heart was heavy. Poirot had displayed his intentions only too plainly. I doubted more than ever my powers of saving Bella from the consequences of her act. This unlucky encounter with Gerard had roused Poirot and put him on his mettle. Suddenly, I felt a hand laid on my shoulder and turned to face Gabriel Stoner. We stopped and greeted him, and he proposed strolling with us back to our hotel. "What are you doing here, Stoner?" replied Poirot. "One must stand by one's friends," replied the other dryly, "especially when they are unjustly accused." "Then you do not believe that Jack Renaud committed the crime?" Oops, sorry, that was Hastings. "Then you do not believe that Jack Renaud committed the crime?" I asked eagerly. "Certainly I don't. I know the lad. I admit that there have been one or two things in the business that stagger me completely, but nonetheless, in spite of his fool way of taking it, I'll never believe that Jack Renaud is a murderer." My heart warmed to the secretary. His words seemed to lift a secret weight from my heart. "I have no doubt that many people feel as you do," I exclaimed. "There is really absurdly little evidence against him. I should say that there was no doubt of his acquittal, no doubt whatsoever." But Stoner hardly responded as I could have wished. "I'd give a lot to think as you do," he said gravely. He turned to Poirot. "What's your opinion, monsieur?" "I think that things look very black against him," said Poirot quietly. "You believe him guilty?" said Stoner sharply. "No, but I think you will find it hard to prove his innocence." "He's behaving so damned queerly. I think Jack thinks that Martha did it." "He's behaving so damned queerly," muttered Stoner. "Of course, I realize that there's a lot more in the affair than meets the eye. Gerard's not wise to that because he's an outsider, but the whole thing has been damned odd. As to that, least said soonest mended. If Mrs. Renaud wants to hush anything up, I'll take my cue from her. It's her show, and I've too much respect for her judgment to shove my oar in. But I can't get behind the attitude of Jack's. Anyone would think he wanted to be thought guilty." "But it's absurd!" I cried, bursting in. "For one thing, the dagger!" I paused, uncertain as to how much Poirot would wish me to reveal. I continued choosing my words carefully. We know that the dagger could not have been in Jack Renaud's possession that evening. Mrs. Renaud knows that." "True," said Stoner. "When she recovers, she will doubtlessly say all this and more. Well, I must be leaving you." "One moment." Poirot's hand arrested his departure. "Can you arrange for word to be sent to me at once, should Madame Renaud recover consciousness?" "Certainly, that's easily done." The point about the dagger is good, Poirot," I urged as we went upstairs. I couldn't speak very plainly with Stoner. "That was quite right of you. We might as well keep the knowledge to ourselves as long as we can. As to the dagger, your point hardly helps Jack Renaud. You remember that I was absent for an hour this morning before we started from London?" "Yes." "Well, I was employed in trying to find the firm Jack Renaud employed to convert his souvenirs. It was not very difficult. Ah bien. Hastings, they made to his order not 2 paper knives, but 3, so that after giving one to his mother and one to Bella Duveen, there was a third, which he doubtlessly retained for his own use. No, Hastings, I fear the dagger question will not help us to save him from the guillotine." "It won't come to that," I cried, stung. Poirot shook his head uncertainly. "You will save him," I cried positively. Poirot glanced at me dryly. "Have you not rendered it impossible, mon ami?" "Some other way," I muttered. "Ah, sapristi. Sapristi. But is a miracles you ask from me? No, say no more. Let us instead see what's in this letter." As he drew out the envelope from his breast pocket, his face contracted as he read, then he handed the flimsy sheet to me. "There are other women in the world who suffer, Hastings." The writing was blurred, and the note had evidently been written in great agitation. "Dear Mr. Poirot, if you get this, I beg of you to come to my aid. I have no one to turn to, and at all costs Jack must be saved. I implore you on my knees to help us. Martha Dubril." I handed it back, moved. God, Hastings just doesn't think about anything at all. Anything. Anyways, now apparently he's thought of something. "You will go?" "At once. We will command an auto." Half an hour later saw us at the Villa Marguerite. Martha was at the door to meet us, and led Poirot in, clinging with both hands to one of his. "Ah, you have come. It is good of you. I have been in despair, not knowing what to do. They will not let me go to see him in person even. I suffer horribly. I am nearly mad. Is it true what they say, that he does not deny the crime? But that is madness. It is impossible that he should have done it. Never for 1 minute will I believe it." "Neither do I believe it, mademoiselle," said Poirot gently. "But then why does he not speak? I do not understand." "Perhaps because he is screening someone," suggested Poirot, watching her. Martha frowned. "Screening someone? Do you mean his mother?" "Ah, from the beginning I've suspected her. Who inherits all the vast fortune? She does. It is easy to wear widow's weeds and play the hypocrite. And they say that when she was arrested she fell down, like that." She made a dramatic gesture. I assume that was this. "And without doubt, Stoner the secretary, he helped her. They are as thick as thieves, those two. It is true she is older than he, but what do men care if a woman is rich?" There was a hint of bitterness in her tone. "Stoner was in England," I put in. "He says so, but who knows?" "Mademoiselle," said Poirot quietly, "if we are to work together, you and I, we must have things clear. First I will ask you a question." "Yes, monsieur." "Are you aware of your mother's real name?" Martha looked at him for a minute, then, letting her head fall forwards on her arm, she burst into tears. There," said Poirot, patting her on the shoulder. "Calm yourself, petite. I see that you know. Now a second question. Do you know who Renaud was?" Renaud? She raised her head from her hands and gazed at him wonderingly. "Ah, I see you do not know that. Now listen to me carefully." Step by step he went over the case, much as he had done to me on the day of our departure from England. Martha listened spellbound. When he had finished, she drew a long breath. "But you are wonderful, magnificent. You are the greatest detective in the world." With a swift gesture, she slipped off her chair and knelt before him with an abandonment that was wholly French. Sweet. Save him, monsieur, she cried. I love him so much. Oh, save him, save him, save him. And that is the end of chapter 24.